In the dense jungles of Vietnam, where death lurked behind every tree and survival depended on split-second decisions made under impossible pressure, a single broken radio antenna was about to become the difference between life and death for 37 American soldiers who found themselves completely surrounded by enemy forces with no hope of rescue or escape. This is the incredible true story of Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, a communications specialist whose desperate improvisation with damaged equipment would save an entire platoon from certain annihilation, and demonstrate that sometimes the most crucial military innovations happen not in research laboratories or engineering facilities, but in the mud and chaos of combat where necessity forces ordinary soldiers to become extraordinary inventors. When their primary radio was destroyed by enemy fire and their backup communication system failed due to the humid jungle conditions that corroded electronic components, Rodriguez and his men faced the terrifying reality that they were completely cut off from friendly forces, with enemy troops closing in from all directions. What happened next would become one of the most remarkable examples of battlefield ingenuity in military history, proving that a soldier's creativity and determination can transform even the most hopeless situation into a miracle of survival that defies all logical explanation and demonstrates the incredible resourcefulness of the human spirit under extreme duress. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel right now for more incredible war stories and the miraculous moments when ordinary soldiers achieved the impossible through pure determination and battlefield innovation. The nightmare began on March 15, 1968, when 2nd Platoon, Bravo Company, was conducting a routine patrol in the dense jungle near the Cambodian border, an area known for heavy enemy activity, but considered manageable for an experienced unit equipped with modern communication equipment and supported by artillery units positioned within radio range. The platoon's mission was straightforward: establish observation posts along suspected enemy infiltration routes and report any unusual activity back to battalion headquarters, maintaining constant radio contact to ensure rapid response if they encountered enemy forces beyond their capability to handle independently. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had been the platoon's primary radio operator for 8 months, during which time he had developed an almost supernatural ability to maintain communications under the most adverse conditions imaginable, earning the respect of his fellow soldiers who knew that their lives often depended on his ability to call in artillery support, medical evacuation, or reinforcements when situations turned desperate. His radio equipment was state-of-the-art for 1968, including a primary PRC-25 radio system with backup batteries and a secondary communication device, all designed to function reliably in the humid, electronically hostile environment of the Vietnamese jungle. The ambush came without warning at 06:30 hours, when the platoon was crossing a small clearing that intelligence reports had indicated was safe for movement during early morning hours. Enemy forces, later estimated to be at least 2 companies of North Vietnamese regulars, had positioned themselves in a perfect L-shaped ambush formation that caught the American soldiers in a devastating crossfire that immediately killed 4 men and wounded 7 others, including the platoon leader, who was struck by shrapnel that left him conscious but unable to coordinate defensive operations effectively. Rodriguez's primary radio was destroyed in the first seconds of the ambush when a rocket-propelled grenade exploded less than 10 feet from his position, sending metal fragments through the radio's casing and completely destroying the internal electronics, while miraculously leaving Rodriguez himself with only minor cuts and bruises. The backup radio, which should have provided redundant communication capability, had been rendered inoperable by the constant humidity and condensation that had corroded critical connections, despite Rodriguez's meticulous maintenance efforts and the use of protective covers designed to prevent exactly this type of failure. As enemy fire intensified and the platoon's defensive perimeter contracted under relentless pressure, Rodriguez realized that without radio communication, his unit was effectively doomed to fight alone until they ran out of ammunition or were overrun by superior enemy forces who showed no signs of retreating or allowing the Americans to escape from their increasingly desperate tactical situation. The nearest friendly forces were at least 5 kilometers away, far beyond the range of voice communication, and the dense jungle canopy made visual signaling impossible, even if rescue forces had known the platoon's exact location. In a moment of desperate inspiration born from years of technical training and intimate familiarity with radio equipment, Rodriguez remembered that the antenna from his destroyed primary radio had been thrown clear of the explosion and might still be functional despite the destruction of the radio itself. Racing across the bullet-swept clearing under covering fire from his fellow soldiers, Rodriguez retrieved the antenna and began examining it for damage, discovering that while the mounting bracket was destroyed, the antenna elements themselves appeared to be intact and potentially usable if he could find a way to connect them to some form of transmitting device. The breakthrough came when Rodriguez realized that his backup radio, while inoperable as a complete system due to corroded internal connections, still had a functioning power supply and oscillator circuit that could potentially generate radio frequency energy if he could bypass the damaged components and create a direct connection to the salvaged antenna. Using his combat knife as a screwdriver and wire strippers, Rodriguez began the delicate process of disassembling the backup radio while enemy bullets whined overhead and explosions shook the ground around his improvised repair station. Working with the methodical precision of a trained technician, despite the chaos of combat raging around him, Rodriguez identified the specific circuit points where he could tap into the radio's oscillator output and began stripping insulation from internal wires using techniques he had learned during electronics training that seemed impossibly distant from his current desperate situation. His fellow soldiers provided covering fire and acted as lookouts while he worked, understanding that their survival depended entirely on Rodriguez's ability to create a functioning communication system from the wreckage of their destroyed equipment. The improvised antenna connection required Rodriguez to create electrical joints, using nothing more than twisted wire and electrical tape from his repair kit. Connections that would have been considered completely inadequate under normal circumstances, but represented the only hope for re-establishing contact with friendly forces who could provide the artillery support and reinforcement that the surrounded platoon desperately needed to survive the next few hours. Every connection had to be perfect on the first attempt, as there was no time for testing or refinement while enemy forces continued their relentless assault on the platoon's shrinking defensive perimeter. After 45 minutes of intense technical work performed under combat conditions that would have been considered impossible in any training scenario, Rodriguez achieved the miraculous. His improvised radio system crackled to life with the familiar static that indicated functional radio frequency transmission capability. The signal was weak and distorted, barely audible above the background noise, but it represented a lifeline to the outside world that had seemed completely severed just an hour earlier when the ambush began. The first transmission was barely intelligible, with Rodriguez's voice cutting in and out through static and interference as he desperately tried to establish contact with any friendly radio station within range of his jury-rigged communication system. His call sign and situation report were repeated over and over, each transmission representing a gamble that someone, somewhere, was monitoring the frequency and could hear his desperate plea for assistance before enemy forces completed their encirclement and eliminated the platoon entirely. The response came from Firebase Charlie, located 12 kilometers to the southeast, where a radio operator had been monitoring emergency frequencies and heard fragments of Rodriguez's transmission through the static and interference. The connection was tenuous and required constant adjustment of Rodriguez's improvised antenna system, but it was sufficient to relay the platoon's coordinates and desperate tactical situation to commanders who could organize immediate artillery support and plan a relief operation to extract the surrounded soldiers. Artillery fire began falling on enemy positions within 15 minutes of Rodriguez's first successful transmission, with devastating accuracy that was possible only because Rodriguez was able to maintain continuous communication with the fire direction center despite the marginal performance of his improvised radio system. Each fire mission required precise coordination and constant adjustment, with Rodriguez serving as the eyes and voice for artillery crews who were firing blind into jungle terrain, where the difference between hitting enemy positions and friendly forces was measured in meters. The psychological impact of the artillery support was immediate and dramatic, with enemy forces beginning to withdraw from their assault positions as high explosive shells began falling among their ranks with deadly accuracy. Rodriguez's ability to direct fire and call for adjustments in real time transformed what had been a hopeless defensive situation into a coordinated counterattack that gradually pushed enemy forces back and created opportunities for the platoon to improve their defensive positions while awaiting the arrival of relief forces. The relief operation, coordinated entirely through Rodriguez's improvised communication system, involved helicopter gunships and a company of infantry who fought their way through enemy positions to reach the surrounded platoon after 6 hours of continuous combat. Without Rodriguez's technical improvisation and his ability to maintain communication throughout the battle, military analysts later determined that the entire platoon would have been overrun and eliminated, representing one of the most complete tactical disasters of the Vietnam conflict. Rodriguez's improvised radio system continued to function throughout the relief operation, providing coordination for medical evacuation of wounded soldiers and tactical communication that allowed the relief force to navigate through enemy positions with minimal casualties. The technical achievement was so remarkable that military engineers later studied Rodriguez's improvisation techniques and incorporated some of his innovations into official field repair procedures for communication equipment damaged under combat conditions. The aftermath of the battle revealed the full extent of Rodriguez's achievement. His improvised antenna system had operated at less than 5% of normal power output, yet had maintained sufficient signal strength to coordinate complex military operations over distances that should have been impossible given the technical limitations of his jury-rigged equipment. Military communication specialists who examined the improvised system described it as a masterpiece of field engineering that demonstrated principles of radio frequency propagation and antenna theory that were typically taught only in advanced technical schools. The recognition for Rodriguez's life-saving innovation came in the form of the Silver Star, but more importantly, it established new protocols for emergency communication procedures that emphasized the importance of technical improvisation and creative problem-solving when standard equipment fails under combat conditions. His techniques were incorporated into training programs that taught soldiers how to maintain communication capability even when their primary and backup systems had been destroyed or rendered inoperable by enemy action or environmental factors. Today, the story of Rodriguez's broken antenna serves as a powerful reminder that the most crucial military innovations often emerge not from research laboratories or engineering departments, but from the desperate creativity of soldiers who refuse to accept defeat and find ways to accomplish the impossible when lives hang in the balance and conventional solutions have failed completely. If this incredible story of how a broken radio antenna became the lifeline that saved an entire platoon has amazed you as much as it has amazed us, please make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. What surprised you most about Rodriguez's technical improvisation under such extreme combat conditions? Do you think his electronics training was crucial? Or could any determined soldier have achieved the same result? Have you heard other stories of battlefield innovations that turned certain defeat into miraculous victory through pure ingenuity and determination? We'd love to hear your perspective on this inspiring tale of technical creativity, military brotherhood, and the incredible resourcefulness that emerges when ordinary soldiers face extraordinary challenges. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible war stories and the miraculous moments when human ingenuity overcame impossible odds to achieve the unthinkable. Ring that notification bell so you never miss an episode, because we're committed to bringing you the most compelling stories that demonstrate how determination, technical skill, and the refusal to surrender can transform hopeless situations into legends of survival and heroism that inspire us all.